Let's get some energy here. How are you guys feeling? Good? All right. So, today, this talk is going to be about Next.js. Raise of hands, who knows what Next.js is? All right. Surprising. Surprising. Some people know what it is. So, this talk is going to be Next.js stories from the trenches. These are stories that we have gathered along the 2 years we've worked with Next.js, almost 2 years now. So I hope this talk gives you value, and let's just go for it. All right. Now, this is my first tech talk, so bear with me, please. Okay, so Next.js. A little about myself before we start to talk about Next.js. So my name is Yoav, aka Hamata Yogi. You can find me on all the social media. I am a tech geek from the early age of 5. I got my first PC. I've always messed around with computers. I've been in the BBS game, if anybody knows what that means. I was a gamer, big time gamer. I co-created my first website at the age of 16. I'm not going to say what that website was because it's a little bit not PG-13. I've been in the online game for 12 years. I was a webmaster. I did SEO, marketing, e-commerce. I founded my own e-commerce business, failed with it, freelanced a little bit, and now I work for Culture Trip. Culture Trip. We are a global travel and media startup. Today, we tell stories that help bring people together, and we bring the world to everyone, and we think that by bringing the world to everyone, we can get everyone closer together. That is Culture Trip. A few things, a few numbers for Culture Trip. We have approximately 18 million unique monthly visitors. Our video content has been viewed more than 2 billion times. We have a lot of app installs, as you can see, social media, and we have a global contributor network of over 300 freelancers. So, a bit about my journey at Culture Trip. I started off as a front-end engineer, promoted to a senior front-end engineer, and now I am a tech lead in a multidisciplinary cross-functional team. Okay, a few interesting things I did at Culture Trip was I taught and mentored my teammates. I taught them React, interviewed over 40 candidates. I built an ETL for Node.js through a microservice, and I led the adoption of CSS Grid and also React. So, what I do now. This is what I do now. I'm a father. My baby boy is 1 year old, almost. My new junior dev. Bug life, yeah. So, that's enough about me. Let's get back to our story. Yes! Okay, that's enough of that. Okay, so back to the story. So this is around 2 years ago. I had a problem that I needed to solve. The problem was that our site was not flexible enough for our front-end needs. We had a WordPress site, meaning that the whole front end was basically just PHP templates rendered and a lot of fun with CSS there. A lot of cascading style sheets just getting overwritten and just a big hot mess. So we had a mission. I had a mission. It was to create a faster site that is more flexible and keep our SEO very friendly. What that means is we need server-side rendering. Why do we need server-side rendering? SEO is the way that Google ranks a website, and in order to read the website, it needs static HTML files. So that means that React applications or Angular applications that are not server-side rendered are dynamically loaded, and Google doesn't really like to run JavaScript before it reads the site. So server-side rendering, a must. So, what's on our agenda today? Basically, I'm going to kind of show you why you should care about Next.js and server-side rendering, hopefully. I'll give you tips on how to get started. I'll show some example, share some caveats, and some tips and tricks from our use of Next.js. Now, the battlegrounds. So, 2 years ago, when I joined Trip, we were not many people in the R&D center in Tel Aviv. We were 2 QA, 1 product manager, 3 front-end developers, 2 back-end developers. We had about 5 databases that we were working with, and 1 WordPress with another database, and a gazillion tight deadlines. Yeah, as always in any startup. So our course of action was to switch our front-end stack to React while maintaining SEO, page load time, performance, and while doing this, still delivering new features. Now, the course of action for me was to do some research, basically. Is to start with reading a tons of articles, finding the right tutorials, understanding what server-side rendering actually is, how I can implement it on my own, and then search for any other solutions that somebody else might have done. So after I understood the basics, I understood there was a lot of boilerplate involved with this. And then I kind of stumbled upon Next.js. So what is Next.js? I'm going to show you their website a little bit because this gives a better overview. Back to the website, sorry. This is docs. So what they like to say about themselves, as you can see by the changing text. It is a React framework for the desktop, for progressive web apps, for mobile web, lightweight apps. Basically, they say they're a solution for enterprise and almost any sort of thing you want to do with React server-side render. Now, the beauty of Next.js, it comes with a lot of stuff built in. As you can see, you have the file system routing. I'll dig into that a little bit deeper. You have automatic code splitting. Basically, it knows how to tree shake and take whatever components you're using, discard the rest. Server-side rendering, like we said, you could fetch data on the server, do some JavaScript magic, and have static HTML generated for server-side rendering. You have static exporting, which means you can host static files on your app through a very simple, just static directory, and several more things. But let's get back to what we want to show. So, why you should care about Next.js. State of JavaScript is a project that has been running for the past 3 years. Basically, it's just a big survey. A lot of developers are asked what they use, how they use, are they happy with it, yada, yada, yada. This is the site, http 2018, thestateofjs.com. So the info I want to show you is Next.js inside the backend frameworks overview is the second most popular backend framework for JavaScript today. We have 35.1% have heard of it and would like to learn it. So that is why I'm giving this talk today. Some great aspects and most liked aspects of Next.js are the elegant programming style and patterns, the fast performance, the easy learning curve, and good documentation. I can vouch for that for definitely. Let's move on. So, why Next.js? What problem does it solve? Like we said, Next.js is a framework for server-side rendering. SSR, let's call it like that for now because it's just a little bit better, a bit shorter. So, like I've said before, React can be server-side rendered, and server-side rendering is the ability of the front-end framework to render markup while running on the back-end system. Applications that have the ability to render both on the server and the client are called universal apps or isomorphic apps. Depends on what school you come from. It's a debate. So let's demo. Okay. So what do you have here? This is just a proper page. This is a little demo app I did with Next.js. Basically what is being rendered here is hello world, right? So this is our very first page, Next.js. This is represented by our index.js file. As you can see, all we have here, sorry, yeah, I'm gonna zoom it bit more. So as you can see, what we have here is very simple. We have one simple default export, which gives us the layout, which is a React component, and a div with hello world. Now the layout component is basically just all of our links, just a list of links that reference to other pages. What I really want to show you here, guys, is the whole part with the structure here. So basically, Next.js works with a very simple pattern. Anything inside the pages directory is a page. Simple as that. So we have the about page, which we just saw, and we have a bit more pages. I'll get into them in a few minutes. So this is our hello world, like I said, built with Next.js. If we open up React DevTools, you can see we have our app, we have a container, and unknown stuff. We're using style components to render some stuff. And as you can see, this is just a page. All right, now for a few other things. Let's dive a bit deeper. Now, I like to use, like Liad was talking about, state management and stuff like that. So at Culture Trip and most of my projects, I like to work with MobX. So I'm going to show you a simple MobX example here, if I can see it. There we go. So let's look at a little MobX's examples. This will work, right? Yeah. Okay, so what's happening here? Actually, I'm initializing a component, just has some random phrases. Okay, just choose one phrase as our chosen phrase. We have another variable that is for a counter, and this is using MobX, like I said. So we are defining some sort of action that's going to change the state. The change of the state is going to be just a new phrase that's going to be chosen, and it's also going to increment our counter. All we have here is the layout, like I showed before, which is the links we have, and just a little bit of HTML, JS6. What we have here is the decoration of MobX. And for those of you who don't know MobX, just a little thing. An observable is just a set of data that we watch, and an action that changes an observable piece of data will just trigger a re-render in React with MobX React. That's just kind of onto it. Now let's see how it looks here. This is our MobX example, very beautiful, lean, clean. Let's bump it up a little bit. It's a little bullshit generator. So all it does is it has a button, like I said, it has a counter. Right now we haven't clicked it yet. We have some sort of a phrase. As soon as we click the button, phrase changes, and also the number changes. How fun. So the more we click it, the more the counter will raise, different stuff. Another piece of technology I like working with is styled components. So I'm just gonna kind of show what I've done with, so we have this MobX lean BS generator, and I also made one with style components, but just I threw in some styles and kind of went crazy. Excuse me for not having nice graphics. I'm not a designer. So now we have the same functionality, just with some more style. Now, how does it look in the code base? So for those of you who do not have experience with style components is just a very nice and declarative way to call your React components and encapsulate style inside of them. You write regular CSS inside of a template literal string, and styled components just takes care of all the rest. It does auto prefixing. It gives you the ability to do CSS and JS, which gives you the strength just to have variables and just change things in style according to interactions. So right now I'm just going to show you what we have here is a little button that has lots of style, and we have a header that has a bit more style, and we have the styled BS button shit. And in the end, we're exporting the style component example. All it has is a header and the styled button generator. and we wrap it with an observer just so MobX can kind of listen to the changes. All right, so that's that. Now I want to get back to the presentation. All right, so we've talked about this, what it does, server-side rendering. We've seen some basics. Now that we've seen some basics, before we get to problems introduction, I want to show you one more little example. Data fetching with MobX, with the Next.js. So the beauty of Next.js, and one of its most powerful points, is that it adds another lifecycle hook to React. So all of us know the lifecycle hooks for React: the component did mount, did update, should update, yada yada yada. So what Next actually adds is this very nifty little function, asynchronous function called getInitialProps. As the name kind of hints, this is a way to get the props you need, the initial props for the server-side rendering. So you don't have to use it, of course, but this is a way to fetch data from server to server and then generate your static HTML before it renders, and then JavaScript takes over to the client side. So let's take a look at this example. I'm going to bump it up a little bit so you guys can see it. Can you see well? Yeah, everybody? Cool. So we have our data fetch example here. Get initial props. It gets 3 arguments inside an object. You have the response, the request, and the query. Now, the query itself is just exactly like URL query param. It gets an object that is the breakdown of the query param of the URL. The request object is the actual request object that is passed from Node.js into the React component. You can read like whatever the request headers, cookies, whatever you want. Same with the response. The response that you get back from Next.js into your component. So let's have a look. So what I've done here is just initialize some sort of object. Wrap the try and catch. I'm using fetch web API in order to use fetch in Node.js or in Next, which is actually in Node. We need to use just a library called isomorphic fetch, which is just a polyfill for Node. So I'm using the async await syntax. Whoever's not down with ES7, get down with it. It's really cool. So I'm just calling some sort of mock data. I'm calling Star Wars API, if anyone knows it. Choosing a random number. Star Wars APIs give you just a way to reference a number and a person or a planet or whatever and get some JSON data on it. So this will log on the server. This is mock data. And we're actually waiting for it to parse the JSON. If there's an error, we catch it and print it. What is returned from the function getInitialProps is the actual props that'll be inside of the component. So inside our render function, the data that we've already declared actually here is extracted out of this props, because this is what we returned. Right? So then we can use this data. Now, if we have no data, we don't render anything. But if we have data, we just take the data, map it out, and print it. That's all this does. Now, let's see it in action. So as you can see, this is our data sample. We got Dexter, Jessler, whoever that is from Star Wars. And each time we refresh the page, a new request is going to get out and new data is going to get fetched. Because I'm using randomness, so sometimes I don't get data. But as you can see, now we have a different character. So that is the beauty of getInitialProps. Back to problems in production. So, like I said, we've been working with Next.js for a year and 9 months now, about right near, give or take. So a few snafus we run into is with deployment. Next, in order to build Next, first of all, Next is a technology that was built by the company Zeit. If anyone knows them, they are a cloud computing company. They sell cloud services, and they have a great deployment service called Now. So if you use Next with Now, it's just a cinch. Basically, you have a CLI tool. You start a Next.js project from any folder, and as soon as you want to push it into production, you just type Now, and it'll upload it. It's crazy. But we chose not to use it, and then we kind of ran into all kinds of build steps. We used Jenkins in order to kind of build our thing. And what we've learned is you have to build only one time and use that exact same build for different instances. What we did at first was create different builds for different machines that we're holding. We're using AWS, and we have ALB system and just a load balancer. So we have a few machines. Depending on the traffic, it's split correctly. But as soon as we had different build IDs, some clients were getting references to JavaScript files of the other build. And then we had all kinds of problems there. As soon as we kind of figured it out that we have to have only one build in different instances, that's what worked it out for us. Another very interesting thing that we've learned along the way is when using Node.js and kind of trying to fetch or initialize data on the server side just in order to get like the benefits of SEO and that, it is like one major thing that happens is Node.js is single-threaded. So if you initialize some sort of object with some sort of value, that value is going to be saved for all the users that are getting into Node. So it's very tricky, and you have to know and make sure you don't mutate your data on the server side too much, because it might create unexpected behavior. So for us, when we tried to implement some A/B tests, we had users that were not part of the A/B test getting the A/B tests. But we figured it out pretty quickly. It took us some time to do some Node.js profiling and learning all kinds of fun stuff of it, but that is a caveat. So other forms of solutions that we found, I think the most important thing when using Next.js and doing server-side rendering is understanding the complete life cycle of the pages and the components. So one solution we chose to implement was we wrapped all of our page components with a higher order function to prepare kind of the props for that page. The thing that it did create was a little bit of complexity in terms of when the higher order component is called, because of getInitialProps, which is supposed to be the first function in the lifecycle method that is called, which initializes the data. And when you put a higher order function, it kind of messes up when you think it's going to be called. So that's kind of something we've learned that was a bit confusing. I think for the future, and as a tip, I'd recommend to kind of put patterns like higher order components and render props to the side when using Next.js, at least for the page level components, just because it kind of gets messy. Besides that, Next.js, like I said, has the file writing system, which is great. It's very easy. If you have a very simple application or site, just putting in another page and having just presentational components is great. But as soon as you need a bit more and you want to add some more business logic that happens on the server, you're going to have to use a custom server. So at Culture Trip, we use Express as our custom server. So actually, we're overriding what Next does and looking at each route, and then we have some fun stuff happening for each route. But when you use a custom router, you need to make sure you handle your query parameters correctly, because Next.js uses query parameters a bit differently than what you'd expect. So it's just a heads up and to look at it. So that is our render prop our hierarchy component is kind of a workaround or a hack that we found in order to get shared business logic between components. Next.js actually has a better path. Next.js has kind of a wrapper called above the app that's called _app.js, which is supposed to be the place to do shared data logic. That's something that we've learned with, I think it just got out at version 6 or 7. Right now, Next is at version 7.02. So at version 6, they came out with the _app, which is the root level of all of the app. So you have the root level of the app, but you can have a higher root level, which is _app. You have app.js, and then you have _app.js. So if you need to do any shared business logic, I would recommend to do it there. And some more caveats. So I've already talked about over abstraction in general. Next.js tries to keep things very simple. A file in the page folder is a page. Components can be placed in any directory you want. You can share them between one another. And sorry about that. Forgot to do not disturb. Yes. So I think that render props and hierarchy components on the page level with Next are an anti-pattern. Just use what they give you. It's great. The framework has a lot of abstractions of their own, and they help you intercept the data when you need it. Something that comes out of the box, but you should know you need to use it, is dynamic imports. Dynamic imports basically mean you can import a component in a dynamic way, meaning you can have decision components that make a decision whether you load component A or component B, and according to that, tree shaking and code splitting works much better. So if only component A needs to be loaded, component B will not be part of the bundle. Also, when writing shared components between server and client, now Next.js is an isomorphic app. It runs on the server and the client. The code you write for React runs also on the server, so you need to make sure you're writing import and export. You're using the correct export and import methods, meaning to use ES6 modular exports, which helps have better naming and just is supported by Node.js depending on the version you are and the React. Also, another option is just to run Babel on your server files and also on your client files. That's another. Yeah, that's about it. Now, one more thing. It's Gatsby. It's the main competitor for Next.js. I don't know if anyone's heard of Gatsby, but Gatsby is a static site generator using React. I have not tried it, but I have heard great things about it. But what I do know is that it does not have the beauty of the getInitialProps method that Next have. So to bring it all together, I'm just saying, if you want to do server-side rendering with React, I really recommend Next.js. Thank you.